Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the podcast. This episode of the Marco Martins Revolution is brought to you by Vodcast TV, Johannesburg's premier shared podcast studio platform. If you've ever wanted to host a podcast for yourself or your business, there's simply never been a better place to do it than right here. Visit vodcasttv.com/revolution now and get yourself a discount on your first order of a podcast or podcast series. My guest today is voiceover artist, entrepreneur, entertainment man of wonder, mysticism, dear friend, Kuhle Nkosi.
A revolution is a fundamental and relatively sudden change in political power. An organization which occurs when the population revolts. This is the Marco Martins Revolution, powered by Vodcast TV. Visit vodcasttv.com for more.
Yo, what's happening, bro?
Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I've been, I want to say mildly excited and strangely worried in a way about the conversation we're going to have today. And it's about the aggression of men. And I think, first of all, I'd like to start off by saying that we are not qualified to be any forefront members in speaking about this. We're not psychologists. We do not have psychology degrees. We're simply sharing opinions that are our own and sharing some things that perhaps we see and perceive. So take our opinions as simply that. It's our opinions. We're very open to changing our opinions at any time. And we're just presenting thoughts on what we think is an important discussion topic in society. So we're not trying to really resolve the problem, although that is obviously our great ambition. We would like to resolve the problem, but we're more opening up the floor for a discussion around this. And it's about angry men. Why are men so angry?
Yeah.
Or why rather are they so aggressive, right? Angry is a term that suggests that something's happening to them for them to react. Whereas aggressive is perhaps just the response, not necessarily why the action towards to merit the response.
Yeah, I think, yes, definitely. One, we're not specialists, we're not therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists. But in a way, this conversation, it's more necessary for ordinary men to be having it than specialists.
Right? I think many specialists will agree with that.
Yeah.
In terms of its ability to influence greater community and society.
And women. I'm sure a lot of women will be like, yeah, you guys need to have these conversations. But aggressive, angry, there's definitely something in the water when it comes to a lot of men. And it ranges in age. But, you're seeing it more and more increasingly amongst young men. You jump onto certain platforms like Twitter, for example, and you're seeing a certain narrative theme. It will be some catfish account, a burner account, right? Just from tone of how the person speaks online, you can tell that this is relatively a young person. And then it's thematic, there's a use of language, but it's always pretty much the same. It's going at women for pretty much whatever, so it could be about how a woman's dressed. It could be about a woman choosing to be independent and not rely on a man. So it's like you're a gold digger if you rely on a man, and then, you're a crazy cat lady if you choose not to.
Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
And then there's also within that a sect that then, you know, are going at other guys who will be like, yeah, but this isn't cool. Like, you need to deal with your issues, da 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 da. Somebody steps up and says, or speaks, you know, not speaks for, but will be on the side of a woman in whatever the context of the conversation may be. Then, you know, you see them calling the person a simp. You know what I mean? So it's like, it makes me wonder sometimes if some of these guys actually know that they're incels.
Right. Let's talk about incels and let's talk about the word simp that you use, because I think definitions are important. The dictionary definition of a simp is a silly or foolish person. However, I don't think that's the way it's being used. It's more from a sense of a shortening of the word sympathetic, where you're a woman sympathizer. So it's a derogatory term towards men who are sympathetic towards women's issues, and mostly implying that you're a very effeminate man, you're not very particularly masculine, you're not dominant in any way.
A cuckold.
So because you're a cuckold in a way, right? So let's move into the incel discussion, and let's start that off with the definition. Here's a Google Oxford Language Dictionary definition of the word incel. It's a member of an online community of young men who consider themselves unable to attract women sexually, typically associated with the views that are hostile towards women and men who are sexually attractive. So this is the dictionary definition. However, it seems to be used more broadly than that, from the idea of incel, is that it's not even necessarily someone who's unattractive or unable to attract women, you know, etc. It's more it's used broadly to paint men who are aggressive towards women online and towards simps and sympathizers. You've got this war of like, you're either an incel or a simp. There's no middle ground, there's no in between, etc., etc. However, the word simp being a derogatory term is almost odd, is that you should be sympathetic towards women's issues. You should be sympathetic to anyone who's a vulnerable person or a victim of anything. We should treat greater society or community with some sympathy, empathy.
So it's like they've taken what you're saying, right, being sympathetic or empathetic, and conflated and added on, or compounded rather. So cuckolding nature,
Yes.
right? So they'll take the principle of being a cuckold. Not that you're necessarily a cuckold, but there's you know, like the certain characteristics, the certain traits of a cuckold, and they'll essentially add that in to you being empathetic or sympathetic to women's causes. So if you speak up and say, but as men, we need to 1, 2, 3, then somebody will come in and, you know, it's very closely tied to beta male.
Yes, so this idea of a beta male, alpha male thing is something we've discussed before, and I think it ties towards the derogatory term is more they're trying to put you into a box with other men who use sympathy towards women to try and gain sexual favor. So men who are unable to attract women tend to not find them very attractive. They're not very sexually appealing to women in general. They're either not funny, charming, good looking, any of the various things that women value in a sexual partner. They lack those things, so they treat women with their male feminism. They use male feminism as a tool to gain access to women that they wouldn't normally have access to. They use simp behavior, and that's what they're trying to put on you when you become a defender of a victim on social media. They say to you, that's what you're doing. You're not being a good human being and simply defending women because you're in the wrong for attacking her. You're being a bitch who can't pick up women and trying to be like, don't talk to her like that. She's not going to fuck you, bro.
She's not going to sleep with you, bro.
Like, that's exactly it. So they're trying to put you in that box as if that's what you're doing. And the reason why they do things like that is because it's egregious. In the same way that extreme woke culture will call someone a Nazi for having an alternative view to their own, is that now we're putting you in the most extreme, horrible box of something that you don't want to be. And you're not, but we'll put you in that box so that you shut up.
Yeah, because that's what's convenient.
That's what's convenient.
Right. So yeah, 100%. You know, I think it's definitely that. It's kind of like it's almost like I know you are, but what am I? Or, you know, like
Yeah, very childish, immature.
it's very, very childish. It's kid-like mentality where if I try and berate you enough, then you'll shut up. So to be like, oh, she's not going to sleep with you, bro. And for me, what that highlights is you, as the person saying that, you're letting me know that the only reason why you see any purpose in being empathetic towards a woman is because the end goal is so that you can have sex with them. Otherwise, it's a foreign concept for you. Why would I show empathy or kindness? Why would I seek to, be an ally if not for sex? Mm-hmm. So when the next guy comes along and, is speaking up for whatever, the event might be, for we know some chick in Argentina, right, is now giving a recount on her ordeal. She's been raped or she was, sexually harassed. And you'll get an incel who'll come on and be like, yeah, but what were you wearing? But whatever. And then, you come in as the guy and like, what does that matter? She's not going to sleep with you, bro. And it's like, okay, but
I live in a different country.
I don't even
I'm
live
across the world.
Like,
yeah.
You get what I'm saying? So it's this go-to, like, I know you are, but what am I? Almost, it doesn't really matter what's being said. I'm just going to be completely dismissive. But I don't think half of them understand that they're snitching on themselves when they say that, because what you're telling me.
Yeah, but they don't, you see, they probably wouldn't argue the point that they're not online to only have sex or to find women that will have sex with them. Do you know what I'm saying? That's, to them, that's the woman's value proposition in its entirety, is they're a sexual object.
True.
And they're not capable of presenting any other value to society, to them as individuals, etc., other than sex. And especially attractive women online, very sexualized. So getting into this, we're talking about, we've just given our own very broad definition of what an incel is and who they are and what they're doing and why it is a problem. But what we haven't discussed yet is what do we attribute to the increase of incel culture?
The increase, well, it's what I was saying to you a little earlier before we started. Privilege. I think it's the best way that I can try and related to just, every day would be like race relations. You have a certain sect of people who, the moment equality becomes a factor, there's this self-victimization and anger, right? So a lack of acceptance. And now you want to try and distort the narrative and the facts to almost make it seem like there's a balance when there isn't. And I think what's happening is more and more women are becoming liberated. They're financially independent. They've found their own voice. They are a lot more decisive in who they want to be and how they want to be. And they're vocal. And I think you've got a generation of young men who aren't able to compete in the workplace. They are most likely physically inept, right? So you're talking about guys that couldn't change a tire, right? Can't give you 10 push-ups. Not to say that there aren't incels that are physically
Pretty sure they are.
Yeah. But they essentially are low on the list of qualities that the average person would be looking at. And I think as the gap widens, because when you look at just some of the stats, like women are increasingly becoming homeowners.
Well, that's certainly not the gap widening. That's the gap closing, because men are still certainly.
No, I'm talking about younger generation, right? Like within Black, like I know with African Americans, women now lead in terms of, I think even here in SA, Black women lead amongst under 30s in terms of
the Black community's access to assets and things like that.
Right? Mortgages, purchasing of property and stuff. So more and more women are excelling within, the work environment. More and more women are, realizing their independence, buying their own places. And I think for a lot of these guys, it's like, if I don't have money, if I don't essentially have control, if I don't have the tools that my father or my older brother in the previous generations had,
in terms of their ability to control a woman,
in terms to control and even attract, right? Because if you go back a few generations, that was the norm. You were the breadwinner. You were the one who was essentially the income earner, because most women weren't allowed to work, and if they did, they had minimum wage jobs.
Well,
so
it's still certainly an attraction factor in our time now, is that men with more financial wealth, with access to more money, have better mating options than those who don't have, and women with more physical attractive features, they have more access to mating options, or greater variety of mating options. So I think for me to try and pull together what you're talking about is, in terms of privilege, is more that there's a lot of especially young men, but it's certainly not only young men. It's men of all generations who use the internet, social media, and then in-person aggression as well, to maintain or try create a greater position of privilege over other people that they wish to control. Yeah. And you used the definition of people of color, when a white person is saying, no, there is balance, there is equality, this is all fair, and if you change this, it's no longer fair. They're trying to remain in that position of privilege where their own personal access, or their own personal well-being, their own personal ease of access to wealth, to assets, to things that they want, stays or gets greater. Let's continue to oppress other people so that I have greater access to the pie or to what I want. So that's sort of what you're defining as privilege. I think that it actually, although that's a very strong factor, I think there's no denying that if I lack the ability to attract mates because I'm physically unattractive, or I'm not very charming, I'm not very confident, I'm not very funny, I'm not especially wealthy, I don't have a lot to offer to attract a lot of mates. I understand the desire to shift the balance more in my favor so that I don't require those things. I don't have to try and become better looking. I don't have to be more conscious of how I dress. I don't have to take better care of my skin. I don't have to work out in the gym to become better looking. I don't have to earn more money. I don't have to do any of these things. And I can still have power or control or access to sexual mates that I desire, because I've got that power pivot that I've created that has caused women to be lower on the value chain than what I am. And that would be my value proposition, is I'm a male. And that's simply it. So I understand that. However, I quite like using the definition of incel here as part of it. It's a member of an online community of young men who consider themselves unable to attract women sexually, typically associated with views that are hostile towards women and men who are sexually attractive. These are people, they have hostile views towards women and men who are sexually attractive. These are people with low self-esteem. I think that's the key, more so than trying to pivot a position of power. The idea of trying to pivot that position of power, or that position of whatever you want to call it, a position of privilege, as you worded it, is because they have extremely low self-esteem, and their self-worth or the value of themselves is so incredibly low that they can't see any other way but an unfair point of leverage. And I think that is what attributes to is that we're in the midst of a mental health crisis, especially post-COVID-19. We're in the midst of an inability to socially interact, especially for young people who a large portion of their life, they interacted with human beings in the same way that we did for our entire lives growing up. But then they were still at critical social ages when they were told to stay in their homes and not speak to anybody other than on a screen.
100%.
Don't access people in a physical way. And this is a huge reason why we lack the empathy, because you lack the consequence. And when I say lack of consequence for bad actions, I mean it in a few ways. Number one, as a man from our generation or older, or maybe even slightly younger, we're used to the idea of going somewhere, and if I have something horrible to say to another man and call you a bitch, do this, whatever, you get a smack. There are serious physical consequences to your rude and lewd and poor behavior. There are physical consequences. You would get a smack.
Yes.
Right. So that's one of the things. Something that doesn't happen to you when I say, Kuhle, you're a bitch on Facebook. You're not there to smack me.
100%.
You know, so this attributes to it is the lack of consequence in the physical action as well. And even beyond that is the lack of consequence of seeing someone's hurt feelings, actually typing something on someone's wall, leaving, and then them taking time to type something aggressive back to you in a thing is an easy way for you to just not like that person. Haha, bitch, I made you angry. Right. But if I say something nasty to a person in front of them and I see the hurt in their eyes from something that I've said, that natural empathy, that natural human empathy doesn't kick in where I feel the consequence of hurting someone. I feel the consequence of seeing someone in the eyes when I've said something hurtful to them, and I don't get gratification from it. I actually get the opposite. Whereas online, you get this sort of gratification for, I brought someone else down, that makes me feel better. Of course, as we understand about psychology, that's momentary, that actually collapses and depletes into a poorer self-esteem. That momentary gratification means that you're actually lower down afterwards. True. So I think that's a big part of it is the increase is now because post-pandemic, massive mental health crisis, lack of consequences in online interactions, lack of ability to have in-person physical social interactions, and you've got this poor behavior, or this rude, lewd behavior that continues to persist and grow because the mental health crisis continues to persist and grow. And if we allow men to be more confident about themselves in the right way, less tolerant as men of other men's bad behavior or bad comments towards women, be like, dude, that's not good enough. You're better than that. Do you know what I'm saying? I know you, bro. Come on. You don't need to talk about women like that. You're a good guy. You can pick up women. You've got this. Just be you.
Facts.
You know, things like that will cause a massive shift in both the online and in-person interactions of men towards women, in my opinion.
No. Look, I think, you've worded it perfectly. Like what you said is spot on. I think it's all of that. I think it's an amalgamation of a lack of privilege, low self-esteem. I mean, definitely low self-esteem.
Low self-esteem is a big one.
Yeah, because no one who has a healthy view of themselves is going to be doing the things that these guys do.
You have no need to pull someone else down when you think highly of yourself.
You don't need to be afraid. You don't need a degree in psychology to know that you don't speak that way if you're not feeling some kind of way. And I think on that, what is actually kind of concerning is how incel culture is creeping into ordinary culture. Because what you're seeing now is an increase of ordinary people practicing, or showing slight incel-like tendencies. So now what you can have is Facebook. You can have people who are like your Facebook friends coming online and being patronizing or condescending, right? Where it's like, but you're not saying that in person. You would not say what you're saying to me right now
in person.
in person to my face. And there's this false sense of bravado where I think there's an increasing number of people who lack the awareness, right, to check themselves, see what their unconscious biases might be, right, why they might feel a certain kind of way towards someone. And so they mirror what they've seen from a lot of these incels, and they now are, exhibiting this kind of behavior even within personal spaces with people that they know. And I think, again, to what you're saying regarding the whole incel culture, if you look at someone like Andrew Tate,
I was going to
right?
reference him in this build-up.
He's a hero for a lot of these guys. And I think it's because in their state of low self-esteem, they look at him as like this idol, this messiah-like character.
He's a hopeful figure for them, but also his message perpetuates what they desire, and that's for women to feel less about themselves, and then for me to have access to women because of that, right? And I think the biggest concern with an Andrew Tate, for example, is you look at the size of his following, and you certainly can't classify the entire following as incel or incel culture or whatever. Whereas the message probably, yes, greatly speaks to those people. And that would be the real core, strongest part of his following, who follow everything he says to the T.
100%.
However, because of the greater size of his following, the concerning thing is exactly what you said, is the idea of some of these ideas, at least, spilling over into people that you would consider normal people who wouldn't consider the ideas of someone like him in normal interactions. However, some of those ideas are creeping over to a more mainstream kind of audience.
Look, I'll put it like this. Andrew's got a large misogynistic following, but not every misogynist is an incel. But every incel is a misogynist.
And I think that you probably have a large part of his following that aren't greatly misogynistic, but they have some misogynistic tendencies.
Yes.
And then that obviously the misogyny with the support of a group like that will grow. And,
yes.
And continue to get worse.
But now you see, this is the thing, right? Because actually since the last time we spoke about Andrew Tate and brought him up briefly, I went and I watched, good couple of videos. And I listened to what this guy actually had to say, because I didn't want to fall into that internet trap of basing an opinion on, a certain figure who's now reached a certain level of notoriety. And you're like, yeah, this guy, because you heard a 5-second soundbite.
Yeah.
So I was like, let me actually go and listen to what this guy has to say. And well, like pretty much every human being, he had some good points and he had some negative points. Is he the boogeyman that I think everybody's like made him out to be? I don't know, right? I don't think to the extent that the internet has tried to paint him. But the one thing that I picked up was there's a lot of selective hearing on both sides. The people that despise him and the people that idolize him. And specifically the misguided young guys, right, who fall under that incel culture. Because a lot of the things that they admire about Andrew, they're not even willing to do. Because he says, you got to work your ass off. He speaks about men having purpose, right? And I agree. Regarding certain things like that, where he's telling you, like, get out there, get off your phone. It's almost very similar to Liver King, where it's like, go do something, lift heavy weights, have, goals and a direction.
Which are the good things, and then telling people to only eat liver and they don't need steroids and they can look like him is the bad thing, is that he lied and he takes 100%. A lot of testosterone and thing.
But now here's the thing about an Andrew and a Liver King, right? They'll tell you the same thing, that a man must enter a room
before
the woman to assess the danger, right? Essentially, the man puts himself in line of danger and the line of fire before the woman.
In 1806.
They're both in this regard, the two of them are very much women and children first, right? An incel will ignore that factor because what they see in Andrew is the aesthetic, the pretty aesthetic, the Bugatti, the six-pack body, and the model girls. A lot of the stuff that he actually says, right, they don't listen to, or they select what they like. So him talking about, taking his girlfriend's OnlyFans money, stuff like that, they'll be like, oh, yes. Him talking about putting your life on the line for your woman, no.
Yeah, I think that, of course, there's going to be certain things that he's right about and certain things that he's wrong about. The reason I would be reluctant to defend anyone like Andrew Tate is his overall message is incredibly
100%.
harmful. And I will base you on that. And there's certainly validity to some of the things he says. However, a lot of his arguments are absolute pseudoscience.
Yeah.
Complete pseudoscience.
Oh, no, I'm just
and
bringing
things
him
like
up
that.
because he's their idol.
Yes, I agree with you, but he's extremely harmful in his overall message, and that's my concern with him. But again, he has a following that's greater than the misogynistic group, and the concern is that more of these misogynistic tendencies continue to spill over. Apologies, and they cause this increase in incel culture that we're talking about. And a lot of this we attribute to the next point that we have here is how much of this anger has to do with a lack of purpose. And I think that's incredibly important, is that the self-esteem issue comes from a lack of purpose. Yeah. And I think that any unattractive man who's been excellent at sports can tell you how much better their self-esteem is when they've achieved great things in sport. And that's why I'm a big fan of sports, especially sport for kids. I'm not a big fan of forcing a certain sport on kids because it can make you feel really shitty about yourself if you're not good about it at a sport.
But pick the sport that you like.
But I think sports are so important that it's something that you can lose at, get that feeling of loss, and understand, I don't want to feel that again. So I'm going to work my fucking ass off so that I don't feel that feeling of losing again. Teamwork is a big part of it, but some people just don't work well with teamwork, right? True. Some people are great tennis players because they don't want to deal with the team. Teamwork, tennis?
Yeah. You've got a whole team behind you. It's just, it's an
professional
individual
level,
sport.
but the sort of people that go into individual sports have a different type of mindset to those who join team sports. I had great sporting people that I went to school with, and some of them were very good at team sports. Some of them were very good at team sports on an individual level and weren't very good teammates, and they perhaps would have excelled better at individual sports. But I think what sports teaches you is, first of all, I hate this idea of not keeping score to protect the self-esteem of little kids. It's like, let's not keep score because it's so shitty. I remember being a kid. It was so shitty when you lost the game. You felt really bad about yourself. It's very important that you feel bad about yourself because you need to build the self-esteem that you're trying to protect. And what we've done as our modern generation by handing out participation trophies and things like that, what we've done is we've stopped kids' ability of building the self-esteem that we're trying to protect. So you need those sort of things to build the self-esteem. And this goes towards a lack of purpose. We're in an unprecedented time of disruption, technical growth, and the world is changing at a far more rapid pace than it ever has before. And I think the anxiety that causes creates people's lack of purpose, is that you create a career and people older than us started a career and stuck with it. And that's how you achieved success. You stayed at one company, you were in banking or finance, you stayed there and you stayed there and you stayed there, and that's how you achieved long-term success. Whereas we now come from a generation of disruption where people are changing all the time and you're still never certain if your career is going to, we discussed this before the podcast, in the voiceover industry, for example, is like, how sustainable is the voiceover industry? Yeah. You start to worry, even when you're in a position where you're earning income and you have purpose and you have a good employment and you have all of these things, there's the anxiety sitting on your shoulder about, hey, this could all disappear in the next few days with the AI growth, with the AI generation and things like that. So I think that's also that anxiety of not knowing about what you can contribute to your community. And I think in my next point is this lack of purpose. And that's why I like it as the terms that you used here, is that it's one thing to have a job and employment and whatever. That's one thing to have some sort of sense of purpose. But a sense of purpose in terms of our genetic heritage was a contribution within a small group of people. I contributed to my village, and I was a hunter. We did a hunt and everyone ate from this hunt, and I relied solely on these individuals around me for my survival. I was important to them. They were important to me. Whereas society has evolved far beyond our genetics, and we have this genetic craving to be contributors to our community. However, modern society, how capitalism works is that you need to be more independent, more selfish with your acts in order to achieve success and thereafter contribute to society. But just this niggling knowledge that we have that if I were to die tomorrow, nothing would change is a difficult thing to accept when our biology sees it very differently. So I think we live in a very unnatural state in modern society. Not to say that I don't agree with capitalism. I'm a big capitalist. I'm a social capitalist. I'm very pro the system. I think it's the best system for human beings to live in. I think that we need capitalism to generate income. That income needs to be taxated, and that income needs to be used for social systems, and that's social capitalism. And I'm a big fan of that. I think that's the best system for human beings currently.
I don't disagree with that.
But we need to understand that we're living in an unnatural state and continue to reprogram our biology and be like, why do I feel this way? Oh, I understand. And you need to constantly work on it and be like, I am contributing to my community. Yes, I'm a smaller cog. Yes, if I died now, the world wouldn't stop. Such is life. Let me be okay with that. Let me understand my feelings. Let me understand that this is why I'm angry. This is why I'm anxious. This is why I'm all of these things. And I think that's a big thing.
Look, I think, the thing is, again, to your point, there's career, and that's great because, well, no one likes being broke. And that definitely has an effect on one's psyche, one's self-esteem. But you need to have purpose that goes beyond just your career. And with men, something that's been ingrained in a lot of us is legacy, right? And often legacy would be, your seed. That's why so many men are fixated with having a son specifically, because you get to carry on your family name, right? But again, in terms of impact on community, that is also legacy. That speaks to purpose. Just the other day, I was thinking how a few years ago, I used to go to this orphanage just to go and spend time with the kids, right? And that's probably like the brokest that I've ever been. So my free time, I'd go there instead of sitting at home and feeling sorry for myself. And so I was thinking about that just the other day. I was like, something I haven't done in a while is volunteer work. And that for me speaks to purpose, where it's like a lot of these young guys are so fixated on it's earn or nothing. And that, like, now, there's that term, go touch grass. Like, it's like, yeah, go and touch grass, go outside. Like, it doesn't have to be. The reality is majority of us are not going to be millionaires. We're not going to be driving Bugattis.
It's not how the system works.
Right? No, it's not. But the system also, ironically, gives you this false sense of hope that you will be part of the select few that drives the Bugatti. So you'll keep dreaming and dreaming and dreaming.
I think the idea is to tell people that they can be part of that select few, not necessarily that they will be.
100%. But now that's the thing is, so many get caught up in the system, get caught up in the trap of it's this or nothing else. And it's like, you can still have purpose by just going out, touch some grass, see how you can be a contributing member of your community. Start there. If you're because I refuse to believe that these guys sit online, do say the vitriolic things that they do say, get off, and then think today was a good day. Like we said, we've identified and established that this is about low self-esteem, right? And in the odd occasion when I've actually gone back and forth with a troll, with an incel, and the little bit of psych that I have read and studied, half the time, especially when it's got to do with the woman, I will then say to the guy, are you upset that your mother didn't give you enough hugs? Is that what's going on here? Right? If she's still alive, it's not too late. Go and get those missing hugs. And you know what happens? The troll will end up blocking me. The troll, the guy who, I mean, the whole thing about a troll, the whole point of a troll is that essentially they don't stop. They just keep at it. Or there's a shift in attitude. Or now all of a sudden there's self-victimization. I had a troll then one time DM me and threatened to out me to my agents and to my clients because I was talking about his mom. And I realized that I'd hit a soft spot, right? And then I left it. But my point is you realize with a lot of these guys, there's this low self-esteem, there's a lot of misdirected anger. And in that unhappiness, if you're not participating in something, if you're not putting yourself out there and doing something that is beyond yourself, right? If you're not doing something that isn't about just you, then you're essentially going to be stuck in a world of despair. Because all you're going to think about once you get off your phone or get off your laptop from trolling and terrorizing people online is then think about how much your life sucks. Because fine, maybe you're not at an orphanage and assisting. You're also not at the gym. So you're not getting that endorphin release that will at least try to help balance things out to counter whatever negative feelings you might have. All you have is your indoors, your loneliness, your low self-esteem, right? And your anger issues. So you're not confronting anything. So purpose. I think a lack of purpose is a huge factor into why we're seeing this. And yeah, I think, the state of the world, the cost of living, the economy, all of that, they contribute. COVID definitely didn't help, right? Where introverts who already dealt with, low self-esteem have become even more introverted and have even lower self-esteem. But find something, because as humans, we all have that. There's that little thing that speaks to you. You're like, what might be nice? Something that might be different. If I did 1, 2, 3, if I tried whatever, go try it. Go do it.
Okay, so now that we've gone through the issues of a lack of purpose, our next step on this was the decline in young men having sex or less frequent sex, their inability to attain partners. And then the even more concerning point that you brought up is they're seemingly unable to or unwilling to work towards attaining a sexual partner, or at least attaining some sort of sex at all. And I found an article on inside.com that has put together a few studies. So it's features on inside.com. I think if you just have a Google search, inside.com, why aren't men in their 20s having sex? The first chart that they've got here shows a line graph showing that in 1989, I assume mostly through surveys in the United States, young male virginity, which is the number of men who've had 0 female sexual partners since they turned 18. I like how they say female there. The gays might be contributing to this stat slightly. So take it with a grain of salt, I suppose. True. But the share of men under the age of 30 who have reported 0 female sex partners since they turned 18. The stat was 7% in 1989. And it sort of ebbed and flowed all the way to 2008, where it was 7%, up slightly above 10%, way back down. And in 2008, it was 8%. In 2018, it was 27% of men under the age of 30 who had 0 sexual partners. The lack of sex is driven mainly by the young. There's a stat that in 1989, there was a report of no sex in the past year based on age. Between the ages of 18 and 29 in 1989 was 14%. and it's up to 23% in 2018 when the study was completed. The biggest contributors to sex, or at least regular sex, are between the ages of 30 and 39. It's then dips off ever so slightly, but what's really alarming is one thing between the ages of 30 and 39. It's a whole other thing between the ages of 40 and 49, and they're big contributors to regular sex, whereas people below the age of 30, very low contributors, and this goes for everyone. However, young men are the main drivers of this, where 28% of young men are contributing to the lack of sex, and 18% of women are contributing to the lack of sex.
I'd love to see those stats now after COVID. 'Cause that's pre-COVID.
That's pre-COVID numbers, so the stats will certainly change, but
Exponentially. So
no study available to me here.
that's not shocking, honestly. Because think about it, 2008. And then 2018, 10 years. That 10-year period, social media, tech in general, right? Huge developments, right? Gaming culture, the number of different. I mean, in 2008, there was Facebook, right? And like those that still held on to their MySpace accounts. You didn't even have Twitter. Twitter wasn't a thing in 2008, so it was really just Facebook, and people were still trying to figure the whole social media thing out. You know, at that point, I think I got my MySpace account in like 2004. And that was when you could still genuinely make friends with people from other countries. Shout out to Ash. She's my first social media friend from MySpace. I got her to join Facebook. And today, nearly, 20 years actually, we are still friends, right? She's like my longest pen pal. But all of that's changed, and things have become so completely warped in that 10-year period where Twitter came into the picture, Instagram came into the picture, and so the behavioral patterns changed. There was a whole new norm, and I'm not surprised that there's then been this decrease, because as people became more and more glued to their phones, glued to their screens, you become less social. And for the misguided young person who may be leaning on misogynistic, rhetoric, if they aren't given the opportunity to go outside, touch grass, learn things, right? All that's going to happen is they're going to get swallowed more and more into that culture. I can speak for myself. When I went to college, right, when I was at film school, I would be like Jekyll and Hyde. Chilled, cool. Had my girlfriend, respectable, da-da-da-da-da. Then Fridays, after would have the most iconic parties. Like people from Wits and UJ would come to our small little campus to come party with us. And I would get shit-faced drunk, ridiculously drunk and belligerent. And I would insult chicks. I would insult women. I was thinking about this the other day, how there are women who today I'm like friends with and cool with, and they were gracious enough to, forgive me every time. But it would be like this rinse and repeat where I'd get drunk, I'd then go at them and like call them hoes or whatever it is. Monday, I'd then have to come and, cap in hand, my tail tucked between my legs and apologize because I still had enough the wherewithal and sense to recognize that what I did was wrong. And it goes back to your point about saying something to a person's face. Even if you're blackout drunk, there'll be the flashbacks. There'll be the people that will come and be like, Marco, dude, do you remember what you said? Do you remember what you did? So you feel that shame. It's immediate. It's tangible, right? So, cool.
Consequence.
Right? There's consequence. Because also, if you don't show that remorse, then, you feel it. Because you're on the same campus with this person. So cool, I'd go and apologize to these people. As time went by, and I went through, like we spoke about in that first pod, about my, mental breakdown. I went through my mental breakdown, and that also just allowed me to have a monumental shift in my life where I started to see things from a completely different perspective, where I had homophobic, tendencies and beliefs and ideas. I let go of all of that. Where I had misogynistic tendencies and ideas and beliefs, I let go of all of that, because that experience for me humbled the shit out of me to the point where it broke me and like rebirthed me anew, right? But I was fortunate. There was hardly any social media. I was outside. I got to experience the consequences and repercussions of my belligerent mouth. So as time went by, I made nice with these women, and I got to grow up and realize why a lot of these ideals and beliefs that I had were just downright stupid. But outside of the stupidity, it spoke to a troubled and insecure young boy who had low self-esteem. Some of those women I insulted because deep down, I had an attraction towards them. And maybe there was a part of me that was like, I won't get her because she's dating this guy who's older, who drives this car, and da-da-da-da-da. And so I then take my jealousy of that dude and I redirect it towards this woman. 2008 to 2018, do you understand how much has happened, the developments? So the fact that there's a lack of sex, an increase in that, right, or decrease, I'm not shocked, because you've got more and more people who now are here, and this has allowed them to be belligerent, not self-regulate, not have someone tell them, did you hear yourself? Do you know what you said? And yeah.
I think it's a big factor. And I think obviously a lot of what we're talking about today is psychological, but there's the physical element of this as well. And I find this is a very fascinating read, is about the presence of phthalates, which come from plastics, and how they've been connected to low testosterone in various studies. So there's phthalates, which is increased in prevalence over recent years. It's a common chemical used in common PVC products. We've seen a massive increase in the number of plastic products used internationally, and beauty products, things like that, that slip into our water and things that men later consume. There's a direct correlation between high phthalates in urine and low testosterone. And I find that incredibly interesting, because in my own experience, of course, ignoring the idea of extremely high testosterone for bodybuilders and things like it, people who are using testosterone injections to have extreme levels of testosterone, they're quite angry and aggressive. And this is a hormone that is associated with aggression, anger, rage. However, it seems to be that there's more anger and aggression and rage connected to the imbalance in testosterone, rather so than the idea of testosterone being higher, right? So women have low testosterone numbers, more effeminate, more submissive, more docile. Men, high testosterone levels, more aggressive, more getting at it, more dominant. And but there's a connection to low testosterone and aggressive, rageful behavior as well. And this also connects back to the low sex drive of young men, the low sexual activity of young men. Also, huge factor on men's mental well-being as well, low testosterone. So the physical connection is there as well. It's not only are we blaming social media, internet connectivity, lack of social interactions in a physical presence, but also phthalates could be a massive contributor to why men are behaving so poorly relatively in terms of the information that we have at hand. Of course, the first to avoid glorifying the past. I say this all the time. Women say, I wish I was born in the 1920s. I'm in the wrong generation. It's really sad that they say that, because the 1920s was also the wrong generation. Wasn't great. Your husband beat you regularly. Yeah. He cheated on you regularly. You had no say. You couldn't vote. Things like that, right? Things like that. So let's not glorify the past or over-glorify the past, but the increase in prevalence that we're seeing could be connected to low testosterone levels due to chemicals like phthalates. And that's extremely concerning, because the decrease in plastic products is certainly not coming. Post-COVID pandemic, recyclables, reusables, things like that, goodbye. We don't want to. I want my own. I don't want to drink water from a glass. Someone else could have used that glass. I want a plastic bottle. We don't want reusables and things like that. So it's extremely concerning, the increase in phthalates found in males, causing the decrease in testosterone. And we see the increase in phthalates throughout in recent history, and it is directly attributed to, I'm dropping everything here, it's directly attributed to low testosterone. And I think perhaps we need to have more doctors being more open to giving younger people access to testosterone when their testosterone levels are low. And I think this could be one of the physical contributing factors from it.
That's definitely an interesting theory. I think I don't believe in coincidence. I think it's all connected. And I think the other factor, and probably the most important, is the fact that women now have way greater choice.
Sure.
Way more options, right? They have a wider range of options in terms of the kind of men that they want to be with, right? Because more and more women are also becoming sexually liberated. So one woman can have multiple partners if she wants, right? And she's able to now have, thanks to social media, greater access to her preferences. And then also the sex.
Also a decrease in family pressure,
Yes.
right? Whereas women were choosing a mate based on who their family said you're going to date this person. A massive decrease in family pressure in sexual partners.
And then also the increase in the use of sex toys, right? So there are a sect of women who are just like, wow, I'm not seeing what I like out there. I'll just go to the shop, get my yoni stick, and pleasure myself until a viable candidate comes along, right? Or you've got a certain group who will go for, I guess, what would be viewed as your, what's the term again? High value man, right? Where they don't mind competing for the high value man, right? Or the entertainers that select I hate this term, but the elites, right? The elite group. They go for the...
Hey, Kuhle went ultra South African there for a moment.
the high value man, right? Certain tax bracket, or the guy who looks a certain kind of way, and they look a certain kind of way, and then they, intermingle.
Yeah.
Right? So for the ordinary guy who's not an Adonis, who's not sitting on an 8-figure bank balance, they're then left with even less options. Because here's the thing, just because there are the other women out there doesn't mean that he wants them. Just like how there was this tweet. I feel sorry for this. I feel sorry for this woman. She put out a tweet basically saying she didn't want to live for her an ordinary life of being with a guy who drives a 2017 BMW. I mean, right?
Not bad.
No, not at all. Bad. Right? She was like, she doesn't want to be with a guy who drives a 2017 BMW and they live in a 3-bedroom apartment and do an annual or once a year trip to Durban. She was like, she'd rather stay single.
Good for
They ran her off Twitter. She literally deleted her account. But people went at this girl, right? They went at her for that. And a lot of people were like, you have highly unrealistic, dreams for a person who looks the way that you do. And the reality is there's going to be the guy who's an ordinary looking dude who doesn't have a lot of money. And you see it with a lot of these viral videos where it's like an incel that's, been exposed essentially. You see them behind the little catfish, PFP, and they start telling you about the type of woman that they like, and it's like, but
you can't attract
let's
that.
be honest, you're not going to attract that. It goes back to what I said the other part, where it's like, have you stopped to look at who the person is?
Listen,
your
I said
object
this in a
of
previous
desire.
podcast. It's like, my man,
Have you?
if before you go into that DM, look at you, look at them.
Look at the
Make sure it
stitching.
makes sense.
Look at the stitching of that seat, my guy.
My man.
Look at the white of the beach sand, okay?
I think
little-
this is a very small element in
No,
the grand
what-
scheme of things. I think people actually do generally have realistic mating goals. I think there's outliers who don't. I
don't know.
I really do think that in general people do have realistic mating goals, especially people with low self-esteem. They actually have lower mating goals than what they can actually achieve. And then it's just the inability of being able to socially interact to achieve that, especially for men. Women actually are prepared to date almost any type of guy as long as they really get along.
But-
Do you know what I'm saying? So they don't want nice guys. We've said this all the time. It's because they don't want manipulatively nice guys. They don't want guys who are just being nice to manipulate you into having sex. Yes, they have certain criteria, but women are far more likely to cut down or compromise on their criteria of things like physical appearance, income, things like that, if they have a real connection with you. It's more emotional, it's more romantic. So
With women, I think yes. There's a higher number of realistic women who are not like that woman
No.
from Twitter who got ran off.
Yeah.
But with guys, we don't need to look at online. You're a guy. I'm a guy. We've had conversations with dudes, with guys in the gym, in the locker room, with our friends, where you've got that guy, that friend, the guy in the locker room.
Kuhle, I
who's
think this is the
not-
one time we disagree. I really think that's
and
minimal.
and that's fine. I don't know about that, because this is what I'm trying to say is, if you look at what women are saying, right? And there's this trend now where it's almost like a bite back from women, where a guy will come and say, and then the woman will go take your picture and be like, is this you? And it's always a case of, you hear the woman saying, it's always the guy who can't do one sit-up. It's always the guy who looks as if he last brushed his teeth 2 years ago. It's always the guy. And it's them essentially breaking this dude down, where it's like, where do you get off, right?
I'm telling you.
Having these unrealistic targets and objectives in terms of the kind of woman that you should have. And for me, I'm like, listening to a lot of women and speaking to like a lot of my female friends, right? They corroborate this. Where they're like, yeah, dude, like I get these dudes that will come at me and shit on me for me having posted whatever on my Instagram.
But I don't think that's men with unrealistic expectations. I think that's men with really low self-esteem shitting on a beautiful woman to try and make themselves feel better about themselves
But
because they're
how-
clearly
but-
low.
but it's
But I
like
don't think it's
catcalling.
actually their real ambition is
it?
to be with a woman like that. No, it's they have extremely low self-esteem. Let me tear down a woman who's clearly far better than me. And then that way I'll try and feel better about myself for
Because
a
I
moment.
can't have her.
Because I can't have her. So then
Not that
that
I
way
don't
it's
want
like,
her.
it's the same as the old DMs when a guy's in a girl's DMs, doesn't reply,
But I
doesn't
try to break
reply.
it down.
You're ugly anyway, whatever.
But I try to
It's
break
the
it
same
down.
sort of
I try
nonsense.
to break it down because I can't have you, right? Because you're out of my league.
Yeah, but that's not, you see, but they, again,
But it
that's,
doesn't
it's not
mean-
about expectation.
But it doesn't
I don't
mean
think
that
they
it
actually
doesn't
have a
mean that
real
I don't
expectation.
want you. It's that I know that I can't have you. There's a difference.
No, but I think it's beyond that. I don't think that is actual mate seeking. I don't think that this is a realistic person who's like, this is my type of mate, this is the type of woman I'm going to be with, this is this. I don't think it's any of that. There's a person with extremely low self-esteem.
I don't know.
Targeting women. I think it's the same place as what dick pics are. It's a guy who's not trying to attract a mate by like, hey, look at my dick. No, that's not what's going on. It's a person with low self-esteem who's trying to get power over you. Is like, look, I made you discuss it. I made you look. I made you do this. Do you know what I'm saying? It's got nothing to do with with attracting a mate. I don't think that's what that is. I think it's purely about feeling better about yourself because you've made someone else feel bad. It's
Yes.
as simple as
No,
that.
I agree with that. But what I'm saying is, me recognizing that I can't have you doesn't mean that I don't want you. And I think one of the underlying reasons.
I think
is
all of
because-
us in a way are overly ambitious. In a way, we all would like to attain a greater
Yes.
mate than what may be realistic.
No,
we
but
may be. Like,
okay. Here's the thing.
I think
though.
that's everyone, men and women.
But here's the thing, though. You're also speaking from a place where you're a good-looking guy, right? So for you, right, to look at it almost from their perspective, is there's still going to be that sentiment, that element of your physical
I
Your
get what
physical
you're saying, but
attributes-
I think we're arguing separate points. Is all I'm saying is that I don't think that anyone truly has, I mean, besides a small pocket of the population, truly has unrealistic expectations. I think we have unrealistic ambitions in a way, but the attacks on people and individuals and the things where you're like, fuck you, I can have a better woman than you, whatever, is more an element of self-esteem meaning.
This is what I'm saying is when you look at the increase in depression amongst young people, right? Holistically, not just regarding sex and stuff. How Instagram has been viewed the most, dangerous social media site for young girls, shit like that. There's an ever increase of unrealistic viewpoints within society. More and more people are becoming delusional in terms of the things that they want and who they are. So I think that there is an increase of young men, and that's why they look at the Andrew Tates. That's why they look at these other guys with such admiration, because it's like, I want to live this life. I want to be you. I want to have those goals. They want that. They know they can't have that, right? So there's that anger. And so some of these guys aren't having sex because, well,
you're not hot enough for me.
You're not hot enough for me, but I don't see myself. Then there's another group of guys who just not having sex because you don't know how to talk to women. Half of these guys don't like the other day I was speaking to someone who he put out a Facebook post, right?
I'm going to stop you there and I'm going to concede the point and I'll say that I agree with it to an extent.
No.
I want to move on.
Let me just finish this, right? Because it's a feature that I'm seeing quite a bit now. Dude put out a post about this woman who was like, she won't date a guy who, doesn't open the door for her, doesn't hold her hand, doesn't kiss her on the forehead, doesn't pull out the chair. And he was like, you've watched too many movies. And I was like, dude, what are you talking about? She's asking for the bare minimum. She's not asking for a lot. And he's like, nah. And I was like, date people who you like, because that won't be a chore, right? And more, you're getting guys who bemoan even simple things like that. And this is my point.
I find some of those things condescending personally, but anyway.
A lot of these guys just don't like women. They don't. And I'm not talking about sexually. I mean, as people, you just don't like them. It's like boys versus girls. Girls over there don't like. So that's why you treat them that way. And the reality is if you're online every day talking shit about whoever, right, men or women, do you really think a prospect who then checks out your account is going to be like, wow, let me, give Marco a shot, even though there's 100 million red flags over here? So it's stuff like that I think are also contributing factors.
I want to close off on one point, and I want you to give me a short sentence on your view on what is healthy masculinity.
Healthy masculinity is being able to recognize your vulnerabilities and not be afraid of it, right? Being able to articulate it and recognize that there's masculine and feminine in every single one of us. So don't run away from your feminine. Don't run away from your femininity. It doesn't make you gay. And that's the thing. There's so many guys. I feel there's an increase in homophobia. I'm seeing it so much. Embrace your vulnerability.
Thank you very much, Kuhle. My view on healthy masculinity, I think that there are certainly toxic masculine traits. There's certainly a wave of toxic men acting a certain way. So for my view, healthy masculinity is nurturing, protective, and brave. For me, for now, it's goodbye.